Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast and get CME for this episode by clicking on the CME link in the show notes. Today, we welcome Isabelle Tran. She's a medical student, and today's Kevin MD article is A Modern Tale of Thyroid Cancer, AI, Haikus, and Healing. Isabelle, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Kevin.
So, Isabelle, you're a medical student. Just briefly share your story and journey.
Yeah, so I'm a medical student at the Burnett School of Medicine at TCU here in Fort Worth, Texas. It's been a long, varied journey that maybe we'll get into later, but I'm originally from California. I went to UC Irvine for undergrad. I studied cognitive science, which really fit me because it's basically an eclectic blend of neuroscience, psychology, which I love, of course, like linguistics and computer science, interestingly enough. So I've always had a really big, broad range of interests. And, a series of events happened in life as they do that led me to believing that becoming a physician would be the best option to really pursue all my goals.
All right. You wrote this Kevin MD article, A Modern Tale of Thyroid Cancer, AI, Haikus, and Healing. For those who didn't get a chance to read your article, tell us what it's about.
Yeah, so basically, I wrote this haiku called AI Ally for a haiku contest with MedMike. I thought it was super fun because I was currently on a leave of absence from school due to personal reasons, and I've always enjoyed writing, but I haven't really had a chance to do any creative writing since pursuing the medical education journey.
Mm.
So I was like, ooh, a haiku, like what could I possibly write about? I remember doing haikus back in like elementary school. So I knew the format, the 5-7-5 syllabic like meter,
Hmm.
syllabic meter. I don't know. But but yeah, so it really challenged me to, use those creative juices that have been bottling up for so long. And this one in particular didn't win. Another one I submitted one that was more traditional, but I was a bit creative in so the theme of the haiku AI ally was about how like ChatGPT and other forms of technology can basically serve as a support for people who are going through really difficult things related to their health.
Mm.
There's been a huge amount of discussion within the past year around ChatGPT, AI, and just the dangers and perils of it. But I've always loved technology, and I think my cognitive science background really lent me a more humanistic approach to technology. So I wanted to write more of an optimistic piece on how things like ChatGPT can serve as support to bring people together, to bring people closer to themselves, to their health, back to the health community. I guess like I wanted to counter that narrative that is so prevalent these days that technology is this horrible
Mm.
thing that is, dividing people, which I do see some of that, and a source of misinformation, which I do see that as well. But it could be, if we frame it in the right way, a place where we can get more information and give people courage to learn more about their health and take that power back into their own hands, which will
Hmm.
ultimately, bring them back to trusting medicine more. I think that a lot of that discourse around, you know, misinformation and just the internet causing this divide between physicians and healthcare professionals from people. I think there's a way that if we, on the end of like clinicians and like future physicians and current physicians, see it the way that maybe our patients do, if we can understand them from that level, that will bring them together.
So tell us what AI is about. Tell us the gist of that haiku.
Yeah, so it's about a fictional woman who just discovers that she has thyroid cancer. And in that fear, she turns to Google, like she Googles what is a thyroid, and she goes to ChatGPT to find comfort, and it pops out a cute little haiku as well. And after seeing the information from Google and from reading, kind of talking to this AI, ChatGPT, she finds a sort of relief and a sort of comfort. So she's able to process her new diagnosis, and then she turns to her family and friends, and then she calls her doctor, ready to talk, ready to listen, is what I say. Yeah, so that's what that's about.
So when listening to you, you imply that the way the medical profession views ChatGPT and AI stands in contrast to how patients see and use ChatGPT and AI. So talk a little bit about that contrast.
Yeah, so as a medical student, I was surrounded by a lot of people within the medical field, and it was a sharp contrast to my undergrad experience in the cognitive science field in terms of looking at things like technology. And that was almost a culture shock to me. Um, I believe, in my own perspective, that the medical community leans conservative with sort of these things, understandably so,
Mhm.
because there is such a huge responsibility in, making sure that we're doing the best for our patients. And if we make mistakes, people's lives are, in danger.
Sure.
And that's fair. And because of the amount of information that's required in medicine, we don't really have time always to look very deeply into the current events surrounding these things, not at least until after medical school from my
Yeah.
um, vantage point. But like coming from that kind of tech background and coming from, you know, just that, like I've always been someone who's always looking at current events and just seeing what is like the next upcoming thing. It really does seem like people are all about Chat GPT, especially the younger generation. I grew up in an age where I Googled everything. Like I Googled questions I was too scared to even ask my parents in
Sure.
fear of what they might, think of what I'm curious about. And I do agree with both sides in the sense that there is that whole danger of misinformation and things out there, and like WebMD, like that whole, like, it isn't great to have people kind of like looking up their own diagnoses and getting like information everywhere. But
Mhm.
I was seeing a lot of kind of like dismissal
Mhm.
of everything as a whole, like not kind of just like being stuck in that old way of thinking of like, okay, like we tell the patient what is going on. If they're coming with things from the internet, like that's silly, like we're going to reassure them the best way we can. But like, don't look at Google, like, don't look at those things, blah, blah, blah. It feels very dismissive sometimes. And I think that's where there could be a bridge to understanding where patients are coming from, like really hearing them out with what the internet might tell them. And it's an opportunity to also correct misinformation. Like,
Yeah.
as clinicians, we have like that privilege to be able to help people with their health. And if they are coming with misinformation, instead of dismissing it, just being like, okay, okay, like I see that you saw this and I see that you believe this and I see that this is saying this, but this part's correct and this part might not be so correct. But just understanding that people, especially I think my age or younger, feel more comfortable sometimes, like going to that, it feels, I'm not saying it is, but it feels like a neutral
Yeah.
party, or you can actually like talk to people. Connection's hard. So understanding that step, like understanding why people are turning to technology is really
Mhm.
important if we're to correct that misinformation and that danger of AI taking over.
Yeah. And on Kevin MD and on this podcast, we've been talking about ChatGPT and AI for many, many episodes over almost 2 years since it has come into existence, and not only talking about the risks, but also talking about, like you said, a lot of the opportunities that AI can offer us. And I think specifically as it relates to patients, there has been many studies saying that patients talking to an AI chatbot, they sometimes feel their responses are more empathetic than talking to an actual doctor, right? So I think that it's important for us in medicine to meet patients where they're at, whether it's Google whether it's social media and whether it's AI. And it's important not to dismiss it, but like you said, it's an opportunity to open that discussion and correct any misinformation or hallucinations that may be there.
Hmm.
So, why is it important for you to write in a haiku or write into a narrative or poetry form to express some of your thoughts about that intersection between AI and healthcare?
I think it comes back down to the story. I think that as humans, we're very narrative oriented, right? That's why movies and books have stood the test of time. I think that's why when we hear a personal case of someone going through some sort of diagnosis, it sticks in our brain better
Hmm.
than just learning from textbooks. And my first 2 years of medical school, it was just a lot of, text and information, just information constantly being dumped on me and also regurgitating that information. And what really, like, the studying helps for sure. But what really helped me was, when we would have a patient come in and tell their story firsthand in class. I remember a lot of my patients from volunteering at the free clinic before medical school and as a trauma volunteer before medical school, more than sometimes even, things from my first 2 years of medical school. And the haiku format really helped me personally because I mentioned this in the article that I wrote, but my dad was actually diagnosed with thyroid cancer in 2013. So back when I was in high school, and that really impacted my family. And I'm a very open person, but I am more introverted. And sometimes when things hit a little too close to home, it becomes hard for me to talk about it.
Hmm.
And the haiku, the art form, talking about, a fictional woman who could apply to anybody, really helped me even tell my own story and process my own feelings around that thyroid cancer diagnosis from a while ago. So it is almost as if by telling stories and by using, narrative art, it provides like a safe buffer between those very difficult emotions to process, which ultimately allowed
Hmm.
me to process those emotions too.
How is a haiku different from other forms of poetry?
So haiku is different because it has like a very rigid format. A lot of free form poetry is popular these days. Like it doesn't even have to rhyme sometimes, but haiku, it doesn't have to rhyme, but the first line has to be 5 syllables, then the second line has to be 7 syllables, and then the last line has to be 5 syllables. I played with the format creatively for AI Ally in that I used multiple stanzas to tell the story, but each stanza was restricted to that 575 meter. I also played with the format by including screenshots from Google and ChatGPT, but even the Google screenshot adheres to that 7 syllable line that was required in that particular area of the haiku. So, yeah, in a sense, it was fun being able to know the rules and having to like adhere to the rules of the haiku while also kind of like breaking the rules after I knew the rules. So it was a very fun, creative little experiment for me.
So you mentioned earlier that the first 2 years of medical school is an information dump. It's almost proverbially like drinking from a fire hose of information. Tell me why you still carve out time to write and express yourself artistically, and why is that important for you to continue throughout your medical journey?
Yeah. So my entire life, I've been very like go, 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 go. Like I need to get these things done, all of that. And when I switched to pre-med and undergrad, it became very much that. Like I had this goal, I wanted to become a physician. I knew that. And I knew that I needed to plan out all the steps to do that. And then 2020 happened, a bunch of stuff in my personal life happened. Obviously, the pandemic happened in 2020. The whole world was forced to slow down, and I was one of them. But I was also studying for the MCAT at the time and also preparing my application to medical school at the time. But what that time period allowed me to do was really focus on aspects of the application, like the personal statement. And the personal statement was the first time in a really, really, really long time where I had to write an essay, not just like any essay, like a story, narrative based essay that, of course, talked about myself. And that kind of changed a lot of my mindset and mentality around having like creative outlets,
Mhm.
as you were saying. When I was younger, like my parents put me in a lot of like musical things. They're computer scientists, but they love like their choir and they love singing. And that was something that was available to me as like a young kid. And that was something I kind of lost when I got older. But writing that personal statement to medical school, it really forced me to reflect on my journey, reflect on all the things that I had been like doing, go, 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 go,
Mhm.
up until that point. And it not only kind of changed my mindset around how I approached my life, it reminded me how much I love writing, something that I like completely forgot. And then, of course, the first 2 years of medical school happened, and I kind of like lost a bit of that again. But somehow, like life forced me again into this time of leave of absence. It's time to like slow down. And while I was studying for like step one a bit during that time, that combined stress with all this extra time really just like, I don't know, I just felt it in me. Like I like needed
Mhm.
to create again, like I needed to write. I like started with journaling. I started like writing like songs and
Mhm.
things like that, like poetry, reading a lot more again. And I think why it's important and why it helped me was it brought balance back to my life.
Mhm.
It it's like I got really burnt out from like the first 2 years of medical school. And I think it was because of that lack of balance. It's that like always being on the go and just losing myself through that process. And being creative has really helped me find myself again and helped me become more in touch with my emotions, who I am, my values, and just why I'm even on this journey in the first place.
We're talking to Isabelle Tran. She's a medical student. Today's Kevin MD article is A Modern Tale of Thyroid Cancer, AI, Haikus, and Healing. Isabel will end with some of your take home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
Yeah, so I guess the take home message here for your audience, I'm so grateful for your platform, by the way. It's also really helped me on this journey, is that, our career demands a lot from us, as everything in life does. So both career and just the craziness that comes with life. And it's really important to find things. It doesn't have to be writing, it doesn't have to be poetry, but it's really important to find things that connect us back to ourselves. I mentioned how like some aspects tied back to like my childhood and like
Mhm.
my journey. It's just really important to reflect sometimes on our journey and why we're on the path that we're on to avoid that burnout. And more importantly, just to remain present and be the best that we can be. We can't really help other people unless we help ourselves. So to me, art has really been a way to kind of like help myself so I can better help others.
Isabel, thank you so much for sharing your story, time, and insight. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.